Afternoon, everyone. This is Commissioner's Conversation. The topic of the day is absentee ballots, early voting, drop boxes, and my name is John O'Grady. I am the president of the board of the Franklin County Commissioners. So welcome today to our conversation. We started these online conversations in April to provide the residents of Franklin County direct information and assistance about available information and available services during this pandemic, some safety tips and other useful information. The virus has done a tremendous amount of damage in nearly 6 months. The state's first coronavirus case was discovered in Ohio on March 9th. And now we've had more than 127,000 cases and over 425 deaths in the state of Ohio. 4,225 deaths in the state of Ohio. Franklin County continues to have the highest number of cases and deaths in the state of Ohio. We've had 22,161 cases, with 563 of our neighbors that have died because of this disease. Across the nation, more than 186,000 Americans have died. Today we want to focus on what is undoubtedly one of the most important things that you will do this fall, and that's voting. There is a lot riding on this 2020 election, including the future of our country's response to this pandemic. This morning, I was with the chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, David Pepper, and Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. That we did a press conference talking about voting and the importance of making sure that folks get out to vote and or just making sure that that you realize that there's three different ways that you can vote. You can either request an absentee ballot, you can vote during the early vote process, or you can vote on election day. All three are an option, and we're going to talk about that stuff today. So it's important that we all begin talking about this now, since the election will be in a different number of ways, as I just mentioned. Today we'll focus on some of the keys, facts that you need to know. And my guests today are Ed Leonard, who is the director of the Franklin County Board of Elections, and Mary Austin Palmer, who is a trustee with the League of Women Voters here in Central Ohio. As always, we welcome any questions on Facebook. And so if you'd like to ask questions of either myself or our guests today, go ahead and type them into the Facebook page, and we'll have someone forward those questions to me, and I will then present them to our guests, and we'll always try to answer them as they come in as quickly as we can. So let's begin the conversation today. And for starters, I'm going to have our guests go ahead and tell us a little bit about themselves and what their organizations do. So Ed, if you could begin, tell us briefly about the Board of Elections and what you guys do and how you do it. And tell the voters or the viewers a little bit about yourself as well.
Well, again, I've been in county government for well over 20 years now, and I've been director of the Board of Elections since 2016, right before the 2016 election. But years ago, I served as a deputy director, and then between, people may remember my name on the tax bills as their county treasurer. But I think, like I said, I've been here since right before the 2016 election. And again, a lot of people don't really realize all that the Board of Elections does. In terms of the election process, people don't really realize that we're conducting, three simultaneous elections. As you noted, we're doing an election that's completed by mail, and then people who choose to vote here in person at the early vote center, and then those who choose to vote on election day. And so we're preparing for those three simultaneous elections. And then at the end, on election night, all of the results from each of those options that people have then accumulated and tabulated, and those are the results of the election. But people may not realize all that goes into it, the thousands of poll workers that we have to recruit, the logistics of 326 locations and getting the equipment to those locations, the again, campaign finance aspect, the management of the voter registration rolls that we do, absentee, like I said, the recruitment of poll workers, the training of poll workers. So again, it's a significant process that people really don't understand all the ins and outs of it. But again, we're privileged to be in the position of providing this, because I think, again, of all the services we provide or in county government, I take special pride in the fact that we get to help people cast their vote, which is such a fundamental right and fundamental to our democracy. So,
So before we get to Mary here briefly, Ed, can you take the viewers through the options that they have while they're voting? So first of all, how does somebody request an absentee ballot? Secondly, where can early voting be done? And then obviously voting on election day.
yeah, and I think that's the great sequence of it, is that you laid it out. Because right now, the immediate thing that people can choose, the option that they can choose to exercise right now, is they can submit an application to vote by mail, to get that absentee ballot in the mail. They can do that. It is there's a process to it. They have to apply for an absentee they have to apply for an absentee ballot, and they can do that now. They can go to our website, which is they simply Google Franklin County, Ohio. It's vote.franklincountyohio.gov, but just Google Franklin County, Ohio Board of Elections, and you'll find us. But they can do it that way on our website. They can go to voteohio.gov website, or they can call the Board of Elections at 614-525-3100 and request an application. But again, they can always go to our website, fill out an application, print it out, but they do have to send us an application. And you can't, there's no way to submit an application via email, so don't be confused by that. You have to print it out. You have to get a paper copy, sign it, and send it back. And then once we have that application, we process it. And then on October 6th, we begin sending ballots. So someone might send an application in right now and think, oh, well, where's my ballot? I haven't got my ballot yet. Or they request something and they get an application and they don't bother to open it because they think that's their ballot. So I'll get to it. It's like, no, what we're sending now are applications. What the Secretary of State's office is sending their mailing, they're sending out applications. And so when you see that mail, you need to fill out the application, send it back in quickly, and then your ballot will come on October 6th or after. And then from there, be on the lookout for the ballot. We do have a way that you can track your ballot. It's franklincountyvotes.com, and it's a ballot track system. So as soon as you send your application in, you'll get a notice. If you sign up for ballot tracks, you'll get a notice from us that we received your application. You'll get a notice that the ballot's been mailed. You'll get a notice that when it's come back. So you'll be able to keep tabs on the status of your ballot. One of the things to remember, I guess, when it comes to absentee applications is there are a lot of common mistakes, but the most common one is forgetting to put your birth date down, forgetting to put your last 4 digits of your social security number or your driver's license number. And sometimes people forget to sign it. They go through the whole application and forget to sign it. So that's just that option. And then the early vote center, you can come to the early vote center. That will open, the registration deadline is October 5th. Early vote starts October 6th. Easy to remember. The deadline is Monday the 5th. Early vote starts on the day after, on October 6th. We've actually worked to expand our early vote center, so we'll have more machines. We'll have all the social distancing in place. We'll have disposable.
Where do folks go to early vote? What's the address?
1700 Morris Road, across from what used to be the Northland Mall. People probably now see the Kroger's right across the street from us. And so that's where they come.
1700 Morris Road.
1700. It's at the corner of Morris and Carl Roads. So,
and election day is November 3rd.
And election day is November 3rd. So those
folks can still vote in person at their polling place on election day.
Correct.
All right. So I think there's a lot of confusion out there due to concerns raised nationally about mail-in voting. you know, we'll get to that here in a few minutes. So Mary, let's get to you now. I know election issues are something that the League of Women Voters monitors. You guys monitor this extensively across the country. What does the league say about the security of mail-in voting or absentee voting nationwide?
Commissioner O'Grady, the league believes that absentee voting by mail is secure. And we urge voters to request their absentee ballot now. And I'm glad that Ed went through the process and procedures, because people often forget the various steps that are involved there. But we do believe that it is a secure system. It's been exercised for years, and we've not received any complaints or problems that could not be addressed quickly. But we ask people to request their absentee ballot. And when they get that ballot, fill it out as soon as it arrives and return it. Mail it back at least a week before election to give it time to get through the mail process. And with things going on today, we're seeing at least 10 days before. But the nice thing, and what we do highly recommend, is that there are drop boxes, ballot drop boxes at the Board of Elections on Morris Road. And you can take it up there and drop your ballot in there. That way, you know it made it to the Board of Elections and it will be counted. It's a very secure method.
So how long, Mary, how long has Ohio been doing doing elections this way with absentee ballots and mail, voting through the mail this way? How long have we been doing it this way in Ohio?
Now, I'm not sure. Ed, do you have a sense on how long?
Oh, we've been doing vote by mail for quite a few years. I mean, I was deputy director in the late 90s, and we'd been doing vote by mail on the old punch card system. But in 2006 was when we went to a kind of no fault that anybody could choose to vote by mail. Prior to 2006, you had to have a reason. Now,
so the point is this has been going on for decades, for at least a few decades that we know of. And do either of you know of or heard of many problems with mail-in ballots?
Now, my mother has been doing mail-in ballots for as long as I can think back. People in the military use mail-in ballots. I have friends that are teaching abroad. They use mail-in ballots. None has ever indicated a problem with that.
Yeah,
right.
when folks are assailing the mail-in ballot and talking about how this mail system and the mail-in ballot system is wrought with fraudulent possibilities, including some of my colleagues in other counties. That's just in my mind, a ridiculous statement. As long as I've been on the ballot, some of the last votes to be counted are those from military folks that are sending in their ballots from overseas, and it's just kind of crazy to me that folks would question the mail-in system when it's been done for so long. So I appreciate you guys on that answer. So Ed, I've heard you talk so many times, but can you tell our viewers about the opportunity to work the polls on election day? This is something that we've discussed on numerous occasions. Matter of fact, I just saw today that Old Navy is going to pay their employees whether they are scheduled to work that day or not. They're going to pay their employees to work on election day. And Ed, you and I've had this conversations many times. Franklin County is going to pay their employees to work on election day. The city of Columbus is going to pay their employees to work on election day. We're seeing this across the board now. A lot of folks out there are going to pay their employees to work on election day because we need, what do we need? We need 5,000 some people to work on election day just in Franklin County.
That's the number that I've been working with, is 5,000 voters to serve as poll workers. And you're right.
So if you could also discuss how long do they work, how much training is needed, how much are they paid, how do you sign up, all that kind of stuff.
Well,
Walk us through.
I appreciate you mentioned it is a paid, people talk about volunteering to work the polls. It's not volunteer. We pay poll workers. In this cycle, it was a minimum of $168 for both working the polls and training. And so we've structured it. So, and then if you're a voting location manager, you can make over $200 for the day. But we're structuring the training so that the in-person training component of it is very short, socially distanced, small classroom setting, a shorter period of time. And then the poll workers will do some online training as well, videos that they'll be able to watch, and with some questions at each segment to make sure that they're learning the material. And then we always have practice makes perfect, so that people can maybe brush up on their skills to make sure, because we want folks to be confident that they can perform the responsibilities. And so we're going to give them as many tools as we can to help them prepare. But again, when people were seeing the news reports during the primary season with long lines at polling locations during the primary season in some states, those were largely the result of poll worker shortages. And so I know none of us want to see those types of lines in Franklin County. And the way that we can avoid that is to make sure we have a sufficient number of both Democrat and Republican poll workers. And even if you're an independent and not affiliated with either party, you can serve as a poll worker as well.
And also, the league, we're encouraging students and people who do not have health concerns to sign up and be a poll worker. Just this week, we sent out almost 1,200 notices to high school students, encouraging them to sign up and work with their schools to be a poll worker. So
that's great. That is great. Thank you, Mary. So I want to shout out to Malaysia Pollard and Griffin Glaze, who are watching with us. Thank you, guys. Remind the folks on Facebook that are watching, if you'd like to ask questions or make comments, please put that stuff on Facebook, and we'd be happy to do that. I want to get into a little bit into the COVID-19 segment of this. So Ed, if you could talk a little bit about one, how many polling locations do we have this year? Are we reducing the number of polling locations due to the pandemic? And then what are some of the special precautions that you guys are taking at the board, preparing for, not just at the early vote center, but at all the polling locations, and preparing for election day, so that folks are going to feel safe to come out either during the early vote portion at 1700 Morse Road, which is a gigantic location, and you guys have all kinds of ability to be able to do distancing up there, but then also at the polling locations. What kind of precautions are you guys taking? So first question, are we reducing the number of space of locations? And two, what are you guys doing to keep people safe?
We're not, well, the only locations that we are not going to be using again are the nursing homes that we didn't, we chose to move out of the nursing homes in the primary. So we're not going to go back to those, but we're at 326 polling locations throughout the county. Again, we don't want to consolidate locations or close locations, because we know that it creates disruption, because voters then may go back to their old polling location. But we do send out a notice to any location we're changing. The ones we are changing are small in number right now, and they are typically a location is really chosen that they don't want us to come back, or there's construction or some other physical restrictions on the space that make it that we need to move. But we've reviewed all of our locations. We're looking at the ones that we can easily create the social distancing because they are big facilities. The ones that there are others that we're looking at in terms of steps that we'll have to take to put barriers in place to create the space necessary to ensure that it's a safe environment. But again, we're reviewing all of our locations. At the early vote center, I will have to I kind of add to that is that we're actually creating all this space because we're taking our logistics operation out of the Board of Elections and moving it off-site, which will open up about 2,800 or 28,000 square feet. So now we can have more machines, socially distanced, and provide more room and space for check-in for voters. And we are, again, we'll have masks available for somebody who doesn't have a mask. We have, all of our staff have the appropriate protective equipment on. And one of the things we're going to be implementing is kind of a what I refer to now as like a digital pencil, is that the voters, to make that process as touchless as possible, that the voter will be able to sign in. They'll be given one of these, they sign in, and they use it throughout the process to make their selections on the voting machine and make the process as touchless as possible. And then they'll see these, if you're going to the polls on election day, you'll see something like this at the polls on election day. Again, so we're looking at those locations to create the social distancing. The thing we don't want to do is we don't want to consolidate locations because of the disruption. But like any election, there are going to be location moves because of issues relating to the location. So, but any location that has to change, those voters will get a postcard in the mail telling them that their polling location's changed. So, yeah, so we're taking a lot of steps both as a safeguard for our poll workers, as a safeguard for the voters, but wanting to keep the number of polling locations the same so that as many voters in Franklin County are going to the same polling location that they're used to going to.
I'm glad you mentioned the poll workers because, if somebody's a long-time poll worker, they want to know they're going to be safe, but also for people that are considering working at the polls that day, they want to know, what you're doing for them so that they're going to be safe as well. So, Mary, does the League of Women Voters have concerns about, the pandemic and what's being done to keep either poll workers or voters safe on election day?
Well, Commissioner, we do have some concerns about polling locations, mainly having enough, but also with the changes, we have some concerns about people not being able to locate their poll locations. So the League has a website, vote411.org, that anybody can go on, put in your address. It will tell you a lot of information, but more importantly, it will let you know where your polling location is and give you directions to it if needed. I think we work very closely with the Franklin County Board of Elections, and we've had a pretty good relationship. They've listened to a lot of our concerns, and we will continue to push for the safety and welfare of the poll workers, of the voters, and we're doing what we can do, but I think together we can make this work and make it work smoothly.
Mary, mention that again. What was the website that you mentioned?
The website is vote411.org. Okay. We call it information you need. Vote411.
Make sure to put that up on Facebook. So, Ed, and I know Mary mentioned earlier, a week, 10 days. What's the drop dead date to get something in the mail if you want to be absolutely certain, if you're voting absentee, that your vote's going to get counted?
The time frame that the Secretary of State's been using, I think it's a legitimate one, is to get your application in by 10 days before the election. And so that way, because now they haven't, by statute, they have until October 31st, which is the Saturday before the election. But I would never encourage anybody to wait that long because the difficulty of getting it in the mail and then the voter getting it back to the Board of Elections is just not realistic. And so we encourage people to, at kind of the week before the election or 10 days before the election, to get their request in so that their ballot can get turned around.
So if they send an absentee ballot request, you're talking about an absentee ballot request a week to 10 days before the election, right? So that's going to get then the absentee ballot sent to them. But
Mhm.
at that point, are they going to then rely on the mail system to get it back to you in time? Or should they then be ready to drop that in the drop box at 1700 Morris Road?
Well, their option would be to bring it back to the Board of Elections and drop it off at the drop box here at 1700 Morris Road. And they'll be able to drop it in the drop box, and that'd be 24/7. So they don't have to wait to business hours. And they could drop it off at the Board of Elections. They can take it to their post office and have it postmarked on the day that they take it to the post office.
So
So
if
that's
it,
going to be postmarked. Our postal officials have assured us that anything that gets dropped in the mail will get a postmark.
so
But
if
again,
it gets postmarked by when?
if it is postmarked by Monday, the day before Election Day, if
Then
it's
it'll get
postmarked
counted.
on Monday, November 2nd. If it's postmarked on Monday, November 2nd, as long as it's received here within 10 days after the election, then it will get counted. That's one of the things that in Ohio, our laws allow for that ballot to, as long as it makes it here, if it's postmarked correctly, as long as it makes it here within 10 days after the election, it will be counted. In some states, that's not the case. But still, we want to encourage, and I think you were talking earlier about the concerns about mail. The biggest concern I have about mail is when people wait and people delay. So it's encouraging people to get their request in as early as possible. And when they get their ballot back as quickly as possible. Because again, people know you're going to vote. And when you get your ballot, you get a chance to figure out who you want to vote for, but you should be able to turn that ballot around quickly and get it back in the mail or bring it here to the Board of Elections.
May I just put a plug in, Commissioner?
Please.
If you visit our website, vote411.org, and you put your information in, it will pull up the ballot that you will see when you go to vote. And on that will provide information about all the candidates, pros and cons of any issue. You can actually go in and select what you want and print it off. You can take it to the voting machine when you go to vote, or you can use it right there at the table, fill out your absentee ballot, and then mail it, or I prefer just taking it to the Franklin County Board of Elections and using the drop box.
I agree, Mary. I agree. So I have some more notes here. So Angie Alexander and Rita LaForest are watching. Thanks, guys. Eric Grant and Alexis Travanovich are watching. Thanks to them as well. And then I have a question here from a woman named Pam. How many stamps are needed for folks to put on their mail-in ballots?
It's a standard first class, one stamp.
One stamp.
Right now there may be a very limited area that might have a 2-sheet ballot, but right now every ballot is only 1 page. So if you get your ballot and it has 2 sheets to the ballot, there's instructions as to how much postage. But again, that's very, very limited to a couple of precincts if it happens. But again, we're still laying out the ballot because we're waiting for the Secretary of State from some greater instruction. But again, one first class stamp.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. And so how can I tell if my absentee ballot has been counted?
If you have that it's been received.
It's been received, sorry, yes.
Yeah. Is that if there's a discrepancy or something you haven't filled, if you filled out your identification.
If I've filled it out and I've sent it back, how do I know for sure that it's been received by the Board of Elections?
And that's
ballot tracker.
FranklinCountyVotes.com, and you'll know that the ballot's been received. If there was any discrepancy with it that's preventing it from getting counted, like you didn't fill out the identification envelope correctly, you get a notice. And in fact, the earlier you send it, the earlier you get the notice that, hey, you left something off, you got to come to the Board of Elections to correct it.
Gotcha.
No, that's another in terms of getting your ballot back quickly is that if there's a mistake on your ID envelope, you'll be able to correct it quicker.
Okay, gotcha. So Mary, what does the league do anything special on election night? Do you guys do any observation or counting observation? Do you guys do anything special on election night?
Commissioner, on election day, let's see, volunteers with the League of Women Voters this election day will be working with various nonpartisan election protection programs. Some of them will be working as poll workers as well. And, you know, for years, we have staffed the phone bank with WBNS TV, 10 TV, and we use this as a tool to confirm voting locations, voting status, and the most asked question of who's winning. But we're not sure if we'll be able to do that because of COVID this year. But we're trying to find ways to be able to have a phone bank for voters. But for the most part, we will be supporting, many of our league members will be poll workers, and then we will be supporting other organizations with voter protection type of activities at poll locations.
Gotcha. So I have every election day, I have election day traditions that I have every year that I've had for 30 years now. And the first time in 30 years that my election day tradition changed was back in March because of the pandemic. And I think it looks like it's gonna be the same for November. So, but I had, COVID-19 changes a lot of things. So we just have to, I guess, roll with it right now during this pandemic. But I started a tradition in 1990 of having lunch with my father on every election day, primary or general, and we did that all the way through his passing in 2004. And so we continued to do election day lunches for 30 years up until this past March. Primary day, November election day, general election day. And the first time we didn't do it was in March. So we'll have to figure it out once we can. Maybe in March, maybe this coming March, maybe next November, who knows? So we have a question.
Sarah, you can come up with a new tradition for
Yeah,
it'll only be one election, but it'll be a tradition for this election.
We'll figure it out. Ed Leonard's been to many of those election day lunches. We have a question from Sarah. She wants to know what forms of ID are required to vote in person.
To vote in person, it's well, again, you could have a photo ID, and then you can also a non-photo ID would be a bank statement, a government check, a utility bill of some sort. Those can be satisfactory. The other thing is that if it's an expired license and expired March 9th or later, that it's still considered a valid license for purposes of voter ID. And so again, that's something that to be mindful of. So because some folks might worry that their license expired, that's not a valid ID for voting purposes. It's still a valid ID. Again, that photo ID, and then as I said, the non-photo ID are acceptable as well.
Another question that came in: with absentee voting, does the return envelope include postage?
The return envelope does not include postage. So that's and the other thing with regard to postage, everybody in terms of not being able to get to a post office. They sell stamps at Kroger's, Giant Eagle, most of the grocery stores. You can buy a package of stamps from the cashier, a sheet of 10 or 20 stamps from the cashier. So if you can't make it to a post office, you're still able to get a stamp that way. Or as Mary has mentioned, you can always drop it off directly here at the post office.
At the Board of Elections, yeah.
Board of Elections.
All right, so when is the deadline? Yes, yes, ma'am.
I just want to go back to what Ed was saying about identification. And if they don't have the items on approved list of identifications, can they still vote?
They would vote a provisional ballot if they don't have a ballot, if they don't have an ID with them. Thank you for that reminder. Yes, they still would be able to vote, and they'd vote a provisional ballot. And so they'll get a provisional ballot envelope that they have to fill out with all of their information. And as long as everything checks out, they would be able to, that provisional ballot will count.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
You know, the drop box doesn't require any postage. We
Nope.
only have one, and much to my chagrin, I've argued with this point with a lot of folks, including the Secretary of State, that we ought to have it with a county of 1.3 million. We ought to have more than one drop box, but we only have one. It's located at 1700 Morse Road, but you don't need postage for the drop box. So another question's come in, will absentee ballots be counted on election night, or does that happen later?
Absentee ballots are counted. What we're able to do,
Immediately, right?
what's that?
Absentee ballots are counted immediately, aren't they?
Well, we could start processing them immediately. And typically when somebody sees election night results, the very first results you see at 7:30, those are the absentees.
That's
So
right.
when absentee ballots start coming back, we can start processing. When I say they check them to make sure that the person filled it out correctly and that all the information's there. And then it's actually, if all that's correct, we start opening it, flattening it, preparing it for scanning, and then we can actually scan it before election night. But as long as we don't generate a human readable form or report, we can start scanning those ballots so that on election night we are ready with totals. Whereas in some states they can't even touch the envelopes or do any of that until election day. So again, in Ohio, that's one of the benefits we have, is we can actually start preparing the ballots for scanning and scanning them. So right at 7:30, you've got the absentee ballot results.
So when is the voter registration deadline?
Mary, you want to answer that one?
Ooh,
Oh, October 5th. So it's already going to catch up. October 5th, and then early vote starts the very next day.
Yeah, I thought you mentioned that earlier, but I wanted to make sure we got that back out there.
Mhm.
And we've also mentioned that early vote starts on the 6th, like you said, and that's at 1700 Morse Road. If you haven't been to early vote, if you haven't taken advantage of early vote before, this is my plug for early vote. Generally, I'm a person who likes to vote on election day, as is my wife. We always want to vote on election day. I have voted early before, but we always like to vote on election day. It's something we've always done. But our early vote center is spectacular. It's at 1700 Morse Road. It's the old Kohl's center or Kohl's shopping store on Morse Road, across the street from what was the old Northland Mall. If you've been down Morse Road lately, there's a giant Kroger store across the street now. It's up where our animal care and control is. It's up where our job and family services agency is, and it is it's a fantastic facility. We're going to have plenty of parking this year. If you've been up before and haven't had parking, we're going to have plenty of parking this year. And so there is there's always a lot going on, but if you go up and you vote early and you get up, especially if you have this year with the pandemic, people aren't necessarily working the normal 40-hour work week, and you have the ability during the week to get up there when maybe there isn't as big a crowd as there might be on a Saturday afternoon, for instance. It just could possibly be the right year and the right time. Go up there between October 6th and November 3rd and vote early and socially distant voting as this could be a really good year and a really good opportunity to be able to do that. So putting in a little plug there for you, Ed.
Thank you. One
And you
thing,
might run into any number of candidates up there this year because folks generally find that as a pretty good way and a pretty good opportunity to actually folks from both parties find that as a pretty good way to get an opportunity to campaign before the election. So there you may see any. Although I have a feeling that Ed and his staff are going to try to police that as much as possible this year because of the pandemic, and as well they should. But anyway, that's my little plug for early voting, and candidates should act appropriate,ly and that's my my little PSA announcement today. If you're a candidate this year, you should be you should act with a more decorum than usual. But anyway, so let's move on to where can residents that folks that what are they going to see this year? We have new voting machines. Ed, tell us about the new voting machines. They only got to use them in the primary, and we had very relatively low turnout. And so folks are going to see a new voting machine this year if they're going to vote in person.
I think the large majority of voters are going to see the new machine. We rolled them out in 2019, but as tradition, when you traditionally have lower turnout elections in the local year elections, that maybe a lot of voters haven't seen the new machines, and they're still a touchscreen machine that voters are used to. But again, as I mentioned, we'll have make it as touchless as possible with the kind of digital pencil or electronic pencil, but again, people will be making their selections on screen, and then it actually prints their ballot out. If people are familiar with the old machines, you kind of saw that ballot paper moving alongside your selections. Well, now what will happen is a blank ballot will be inserted in the machine. You make your selections on the screen, and then when you're finished, you have an opportunity to review it on the screen, and then you print it out, and you'll have a piece of paper that you'll have an opportunity to review your ballot on paper, and then you place that ballot into the ballot box, into a scanner, and that you've completed the process. So it's a two-step process, but again, I think it gives the voter the multiple opportunities to review their ballot before they cast it.
So for a minute here, let's talk a little bit about voter education and advertising. So Mary, what kind of voter education does the league do?
Commissioner, the league has played a large role in registering voters, but we have a big push on educating voters as well. We provide information, nonpartisan information about how to vote and about candidates and issues. Big thing that we're doing is going into right now into high schools and educating young voters on voting, the value of their vote, the importance of voting, and how to find information, because most people say they don't vote because they don't have the information. But we have worked on addressing those issues. And I know I keep throwing out vote411.org website, but it is our premier product that you can go any place in the nation, pull that website up, put your address in, and it will give you information that you need. Many people are familiar with our voter information bulletin. We call it the VIB. And this year it'll be published in the Dispatch on October the 9th. And it's the paper edition of where we survey candidates. And if they answer, we publish those so that people have an idea of kind of where they stand or their positions on issues. We also provide pros and cons on issues. Our information is nonpartisan, but we try to ask questions that most people are concerned about, or that information that they need in order to decide where and how to cast their vote. This year we'll also be in partnership with the Columbus Metro Libraries to do candidates forum, and those will be posted on our website as well.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So real quick shout out to Michelle Lynn and Robin Harris that are watching. So Ed, if you could talk to us about the possibility of advertising the election this year.
Great. Yes, the board is working on a communication plan. I anticipate we will be doing some advertising this year. It's just kind of ironing out the details of how it's going to look. Secretary of State and how much we'll be seeking for that communication plan. But Secretary of State's encouraging it at their conference just ended last week. They had a segment that, again, they were encouraging boards of elections to advertise and help get the message out because of the unique nature of this year's circumstances, to provide people with information about all the options that they have and the importance of voting early in order to ensure that they're able to cast that right to vote. So we anticipate having a multi-channeled communication effort, voter education effort, print, digital, radio, TV, the various form, even for people who've cut the cable, that sort of thing, but that we'll be able to get those messages out in the community about the importance of voting and voting early and not delaying. We just cannot stress enough that people should exercise their options to vote early and exercise them early. Vote early.
And I've heard that your office may have a YouTube channel on how to use the new voting machines. Is that true?
I know we have a video out about how to use the new voting machines. I haven't watched it in a bit, but I know we've made that about the new machines. We're also working on some other kind of short explanations of various aspects of the election as well.
Great.
So Ed, a question came in. Would it be possible for somebody to stuff a bunch of fake votes in the ballot drop box? My guess is the answer to that question is it might be possible for people to stuff the ballot or fake ballots into the drop box, but your folks would catch that without any problem, right?
Correct. Yeah, you're right that they could put anything they want. I mean, they could put things in the ballot box, but again, our folks we would be able to determine whether or not that's a valid ballot, or if it's something that's been. I mean, the idea of it being photocopied or it's just that's not going to get past us. I mean, it's special ballot stock, and there are the ballot itself is structured in a way that we would recognize it. We'd recognize the ID envelope. We review them all. So there are safeguards in place to prevent that. So that's a very good question. I appreciate the opportunity to address that.
I addressed that in the letter to the editor that I wrote a couple weeks ago. One of my colleagues in Delaware County suggested that was that would be a problem as well, especially if we had multiple drop boxes. And I addressed that in the letter to the editor that I wrote a couple weeks ago. That's kind of a silly notion that I mean, your folks that work at the Board of Elections would catch that without any problem, is my guess. So Mary, we as a nation just celebrated a big milestone, major milestone recently when it came to voting rights. You want to share with our viewers something about that? I know that my mother-in-law, who's a friend of yours, yes. My wife, my daughters were all very excited about that. So you want to expound on that a little bit? I'll let you have the honors. Better you talk about it than me.
I am sure you've heard a lot about it.
I did.
The 19th Amendment gave all women the right to vote, but not all women were recognized in all states. But 100 years ago was an exciting time, especially for the League. The League of Women Voters were formed, and we stood strong. Ever since then, our actions have changed some of our political systems, and our actions are definitely supporting millions of voters. Since 1920, the League has been a safe haven for women, regardless of which party they belong to. But it's been a safe haven for women to find their voices on issues that matter to them. One early leader in the League, she said, it's like a university without walls, that the members come, they learn, and they remain to shape the curriculum of politics. So 100 years later, we're still here, and we remain governed by the people and for the people. And we cannot function without the active involvement of the people. The League remains a force for change today because our members and our supporters have never lost sight of the importance of the voice of the people. And we are looking forward to another 100 years of doing the same, building and making sure democracy is at hand and everyone has the right to exercise their vote.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. I have two women voters in my house. Well, only one now because my daughter just moved this week, but two women voters in my family, in my immediate family, and one who is 12 years old and wants to tell everybody else in the house how to vote and can't wait until she's old enough to vote. And I just hope that when she's old enough to vote, that I'll be honored to get her vote myself. But you know, it's a proud thing around here, and especially with a mother-in-law who is so actively involved in the League of Women Voters. You know, my mother-in-law, Barb Hike's, a wonderful one.
And very smart, very smart. And
yeah.
one thing we have, Barb may have shared with you, we have a youth voter education registration presentation that we go into schools, high schools, and we talk to 10th, 11th, and 12th graders because they are the future. We call it empowering the voters of tomorrow. And if someone does the numbers, they have quite a bit of numbers to impact this upcoming election. But 2 or 3 years out from here, they'll be the majority of voters. So you might start listening to her, Commissioner.
Oh, I listen to her all the time. You know, yes. There's a lot of good reasons to listen to my mother-in-law. So.
Yes.
Well, so we're getting towards the end of the hour, but I wanted to check in with both of you before we're done. So if you guys can narrow, maybe you can't narrow it down to just one, but if you can narrow it down to just one, what's your biggest concern for the election? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I would say mine is voters having a difficult time casting their vote. And I do like the drop box at the Franklin County Board of Elections, but I would love to see more strategically located throughout the city. I have a friend that lives out by the casino on the west side, and she was sharing with me that it would take 2 buses to get to the Board of Elections to drop off her ballot and 2 buses to get home. And you're talking about most of your day, you know, exercising your right to vote. So I'm just concerned about people's ability to cast their vote. And I know you say, well, just put a stamp on it. But when you go to Kroger's, you got to buy a book of stamps or someplace. And that can be easy for some, but not necessarily everyone. So That was high.
That's right. That's
Well,
great
from the
point,
public
Barry.
standpoint, we're somewhat constrained by the rules that we have to operate in. And one of those rules constrains us from having multiple drop boxes, from having multiple early vote locations. I mean, believe me, we would love to have that capacity to do that, but by law, we're prohibited from doing that, and by directive from the Secretary of State's office. And so we have to operate within the kind of the circumstances that we have. And so for us, it's making it as available as possible. My concern is really, as I think any election official, is long lines on election day. And the way that we can avoid that long lines on election day is, one, making sure we have plenty of poll workers by going, if you can work. And again, maybe your parents worked it, your grandparents have always worked it, but maybe it's time for you to step up, go to workelectionday.com and sign up to be a poll worker for this election. And then the other is on the voter's standpoint, to vote early. Commissioner O'Grady and I, we've talked about it, life gets in the way on election, can happen. Your car breaks down, your boss needs you to work late, your child care arrangements fall through, and suddenly your child gets sick and you were expecting to go to the polls before you went to work, but now you got to get to work early, or my car breaks down, so I got to catch the bus, or I've got some other arrangement, and suddenly life gets in the way. Voting early helps, whether that's at the early vote center. And this year we've got 2 weekends, the 2 Saturday and Sundays before election. We have voting hours during those, or voting by mail. And those are opportunities that, and as you were pointing out, Commissioner Grady, earlier, the normal work hours aren't there anymore for a lot of people. And so, we used to expect peaks during the lunch hour or right after 5 o'clock after work. Well, voters can come, the folks who are working from home can come anytime. And again, so schedules may make it easier for people to come here to the Board of Elections during what are non-peak hours. And so, again, I think there are ways. My concern is our lines at the polling locations on election day, but there are many ways in which we can eliminate those by having poll workers and then voters choosing to vote early. So.
Great. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So, and Mary, on the multiple drop boxes, I 100% agree with you. As I made the point to Secretary of State LaRose, a county of 1.3 million people should not have to have only one drop box. We are by area, we are aren't even in the top 15 of the largest counties in the state. There are so many other counties that have a geographic area that is much, much bigger than Franklin County. And the idea that folks would have to travel so far to be to cast their vote in a drop box is, I think, ridiculous. But the idea that 1.3 million people have one drop box is just even more ridiculous. And it's all because well, not all because. One of the issues, the biggest issue that he cites is that he's concerned about the threat of lawsuit. Well, guess what? He's now been sued multiple times, including by the Ohio Democratic Party, and joined in that lawsuit by cities and counties now all over the state of Ohio, including very soon, I believe, Franklin County. My colleagues and I are about to join that lawsuit. So, even the city of Columbus joined the lawsuit either yesterday or this morning. And so cities and counties all over the state are joining that lawsuit to insist that we have. The problem may be at what point does the court rule, and at what point do we end up getting multiple drop boxes, and how efficient does that then become, and how urgently does the court insist that Mr. Leonard and his staff react to that? And, but anyway, neither here nor there. We're trying. We're still trying and trying to do our best to make that happen. I want to mention before we're done that something very important is coming up. The census is upon us, and it has been moved up. The census the deadline is now at the end of September. So the census is important for those folks who may believe that the census is just about counting our residents so that we can understand or get a handle on our representation in Congress, it's not just about that. And it's frankly, maybe even not even as importantly about that as it is about the level of funding that we get in Congress for so many, not just in Congress, but the level of funding that we get for so many important things that we need here in this state. Mary, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just commend the commissioners on how well they take care of our city, Franklin County. I'm familiar with other locations, but we do a good job, but it does require those resources, and the census ties directly into that. And whatever.
Well, it's a source of funding for so many things that it's so crucial. And I know we're running out of time here, but you know, if you haven't filled out your census, it's such an easy thing to do. You know, we're a couple of policy wonk nerds here in this house. And when I found out that my wife had already gotten online and filled out the census, and it only took her like 2 minutes to do, I was so sadly disappointed because I wanted to do it too. I wanted to do it myself. And she got online and did it. So if you go to www.mycensus.gov, it is very, very important. There are so many things that are reliant on it. So please don't forget to do that. If you are, I need to close out the show here because we're starting to run over. I appreciate everybody being on and paying attention to us today. And you can find a lot of this information that we've been talking about today online on our website at commissioners.franklincountyohio.gov. You can learn more about the League of Women Voters at the website that Mary has reminded us about more than a few times today, www.vote411.org. We will continue to host these commissioners' conversations, so keep watching for details. Mine are generally every Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Commissioner Boyce is generally every Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. But we will post the information on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Nextdoor. Of course, we want to reach as many of our residents as possible. So if you're talking to friends and neighbors, tell them that we'll be streaming conversations like these on a regular basis and posting them to our website. I'm hoping that my Facebook page gets restored at some point. Somebody took down my Facebook page a couple of weeks ago. So that's been a tragedy for me. Until next time, though, I'm John O'Grady. I'm the president of the Franklin County Board of Commissioners, along with my guests, Ed Leonard, the director of the Franklin County Board of Elections, and Mary Austin Palmer from the League of Women Voters. We hope that this was useful information for you. Keep watching here for information on other sessions that will be announced soon. And remember, folks, we're all in this together. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.